Ray Whittaker has been a name whispered across the internet for years, a man whose presence both fascinates and unsettles people who encounter his story for the first time. For some, he's simply part of a larger narrative, the Whittaker family of Odd, West Virginia. For others, Ray represents something deeper, a mirror reflecting how society treats people with disabilities, isolation, and poverty. But behind all the viral videos, online debates, and outsider opinions lies the reality of one man, quiet, complex, and profoundly misunderstood. Ray Whittaker was born into the same small community his family still calls home, tucked deep in the Appalachian Hills. Far from the noise of cities and the modern conveniences most take for granted, the Whittaker home became both a refuge and a cage. For decades, the family lived apart from the rest of society, bound together by love, confusion, and circumstance. Ray's life, in many ways, has never belonged solely to him. His every movement, word, and sound have been watched, interpreted, and discussed by millions who have never met him. But who is Ray really, beyond the camera lens? Early life and isolation. Ray's early years remain largely undocumented, pieced together through fragments shared by family members and those who have interacted with the Whittakers. Born into poverty, he faced challenges from the start. From an early age, it was clear that Ray was different. His speech, his comprehension, and his behavior reflected cognitive and neurological differences that would follow him into adulthood. By all accounts, Ray never attended a traditional school in rural West Virginia. Educational resources for children with disabilities were scarce, and in communities like Odd, awareness was even scarcer. The Whittakers, like many families dealing with developmental challenges, had to navigate things on their own. Neighbors recall seeing Ray around town occasionally, always close to home, always quiet. His family protected him fiercely. He didn't have friends in the traditional sense, but he had his siblings and his familiar surroundings, a small house, a front porch, and the green hills beyond. Those who've observed him describe him as gentle and expressive in his own way. Though nonverbal in the conventional sense, Ray communicates through gestures, vocalizations, and body language that his family understands instinctively. The challenge of profound disabilities. Medical professionals categorize disabilities by levels: mild, moderate, severe, and profound. While these terms sound clinical, they help define the level of support a person needs. In Ray's case, observers and experts who have analyzed footage of him describe signs consistent with profound intellectual disability. This is the most significant level of impairment, where individuals often require lifelong assistance for basic needs, including eating, dressing, toileting, and communication. People with profound disabilities often cannot live independently. Their understanding of the world is limited to immediate, sensory experiences, sights, sounds, and familiar routines. They may recognize people and places that bring comfort, but abstract concepts like time or money often hold little meaning. Ray's communication style, the deep, guttural sounds that have drawn so much attention, could be related to a condition known as spasmodic dysphonia, a neurological disorder affecting the vocal cords. This causes involuntary spasms that alter tone and rhythm, sometimes producing what sounds like barking or gasping. It's important to understand that this is not a choice or a behavior. It's a symptom for Ray. It's simply the way his voice expresses itself. His tone is his language, his bark a form of communication. When people first hear him speak, they often react with shock or discomfort. But for those who have spent time around individuals with neurological or speech-related disorders, Ray's sounds are not unusual. They're familiar. They're the voice of someone whose brain and body speak in a different rhythm, but still seek connection. Life at home. Structure in simplicity. Ray's daily life before state intervention was structured. Though not formally, his world revolved around familiar faces: Betty, his sister, who has long served as a caregiver, Larry, his older brother, and other family members who shared the home. He woke up, often with the sunrise, and moved through the day according to patterns rather than plans. Routine is vital for people with profound disabilities. Predictability brings security. Disruption brings anxiety. For Ray, a walk outside, a simple meal, or sitting on the porch might hold more meaning than most people could understand. The rhythm of daily repetition created stability in a life otherwise untouched by structure. Those close to him say he was happiest when outdoors. The sounds of birds, the texture of grass beneath his feet, the warmth of sunlight. These sensory experiences formed the foundation of his world. He was also deeply bonded with his family. Though his verbal communication was limited, his reactions were unmistakable. A smile when Betty spoke softly, a gesture toward Larry when something caught his attention. In these small exchanges, there was affection, protection, and understanding that went far beyond words. The arrival of cameras. Everything changed when outsiders arrived. Filmmaker Mark Lyda, known for his soft white underbelly series, introduced the Whittaker family to the wider world. Millions of people saw Ray for the first time. His expressions, his sounds, his movements. For some, it was a window into forgotten America. For others, it felt like exploitation. The internet divided instantly. Some viewers were compassionate, moved by the family's resilience and poverty. Others were cruel, mocking Ray's mannerisms or reducing his humanity to viral content. The footage ignited a global conversation about ethics, disability, and representation. Behind the screens, however, Ray's reality didn't change. He still lived in the same house, walked the same roads, and depended on the same people. The only difference was that millions now knew his face, and not all of them looked with kindness. It's easy to forget that Ray never chose fame. His life became a story for others to tell, a cause for some, and a spectacle for many. And while the attention brought donations and awareness, it also brought judgment and misunderstanding. Understanding the weight of public attention. Exposure can be both help and harm. For the Whittakers, the sudden influx of attention from documentaries, news coverage, and online creators led to donations and offers of assistance, but it also led to scrutiny. People began analyzing where the money went, who managed it, and whether the family was being exploited. Ray, caught in the middle, couldn't speak for himself. He couldn't confirm, deny, or explain. The internet spoke for him, millions of strangers deciding what was best for someone they didn't truly know. For someone like Ray, constant stress or disruption can be deeply harmful. People with profound disabilities rely on routine to feel safe. Sudden changes, new people, new environments, loud noises, flashing lights, can trigger distress, fear, or withdrawal. And that's what many began to notice in later videos. Ray growing quieter, less responsive, retreating into himself. What some saw as uncooperative behavior was more likely a defense, his way of shielding himself from a world that suddenly felt too big, too loud, too invasive. What Ray teaches us about humanity. In a society that measures worth by productivity, intellect, or fame, Ray challenges every assumption. He cannot advocate for himself, hold a job, or engage in social media debates, yet his existence forces a conversation about empathy, not as an idea, but as an action. Ray's story asks uncomfortable questions. Do we value people only when they fit our definitions of normal? Is curiosity an excuse for intrusion? And when we claim to raise awareness, are we actually helping, or just consuming? Because behind every view count and viral clip is a real human being, one who didn't ask for any of it. The road ahead. As of recent updates, Ray has reportedly been removed from his home for medical evaluation and care. This decision came after growing concern about his health, hygiene, and environment. While the details remain unclear, what's certain is that Ray's life, once hidden from the world, has been forever changed by it. Whether in a hospital or a care facility, professionals now oversee his well-being. Ideally, this will bring him consistent medical attention, structured routines, and the chance for comfort he may never have truly known. Still, questions linger. Was the intervention a rescue or another intrusion? And will he ever be able to return to the only home he's ever known? For now, there are no answers, only quiet prayers for his safety and peace. How do you feel about Ray's story so far? Do you think the attention brought help or harm to his life? And what responsibility do we, as viewers, carry when we watch stories like his? Leave your thoughts below. Your perspective matters. When the world first met Ray Whittaker, few understood what they were really seeing. Viewers saw a man with deep-set eyes, a weathered face, and a voice unlike any they'd ever heard. They watched as he moved through his days with simple gestures and sounds, shadowed by the watchful presence of his family. To some, it was shocking. To others, heartbreaking. But for the people who truly know disability, caregivers, clinicians, families who've walked the same path, Ray's world wasn't foreign, it was familiar. It was the quiet reality of living with profound intellectual and developmental disabilities. Behind every viral clip and every heated debate about exploitation or care, there exists the daily life of a man whose needs, struggles, and small victories are constant and consuming. This is the world inside Ray's struggle, one that no amount of internet fame could ever capture. A day in Ray's life. Before the cameras and controversy, Ray's days followed a steady rhythm. He would wake early, often before the rest of the household stirred. The sounds of the hills outside his window, dogs barking, roosters calling, the hum of the wind through the trees, were his morning signals. For people like Ray, routine is everything. Predictability offers peace. Disruption brings chaos. His caregivers, mostly his sister Betty and brother Larry, learned to communicate with him through these patterns. A tap on the table might mean, "I'm hungry." A tug at his shirt could mean, "I need to go outside." A certain look, a vocal sound, even a pause, these were all pieces of his unique language. He didn't need words to express affection. He showed it in the way he'd sit near Betty when she talked, or the way he'd follow Larry's movements with his eyes. In a world where communication is often taken for granted, Ray's silence became its own form of expression, quiet but deeply human. Caregiving in a world that doesn't understand. Caring for someone with profound disabilities isn't a part-time job. It's a 24-hour commitment that demands patience, physical stamina, and emotional resilience. Betty, for years, bore that responsibility. She made sure Ray ate, bathed, and stayed warm. She watched him constantly, not because she didn't trust him, but because he couldn't safely be left alone. Those who visited the Whittaker home describe it as cramped, weathered, and cluttered, but to Ray, it was familiar. Every creak of the floorboard, every corner of that small house was part of his sense of security. Removing him from that environment, no matter how well-intentioned, would have been disorienting, even traumatic. For families like the Whittakers, poverty complicates everything. Without consistent access to health care, disability resources, or support systems, they did what they could with what they had. Betty was not a trained nurse or therapist, but she loved her brother fiercely, and in her eyes, love was enough. But love, while essential, can't always fill the gaps that systemic neglect leaves behind. The healthcare gap. Appalachian communities like Odd, West Virginia, are often forgotten when it comes to specialized care. Access to speech therapy, occupational therapy, or behavioral support is limited, if available at all. For someone like Ray, early intervention could have made a world of difference. Speech therapy might have helped him find new ways to express himself. Physical therapy could have improved his coordination. Regular medical oversight might have prevented the chronic health issues that now affect him. But those resources never came. Instead, Ray grew into adulthood within the same limitations. He was born into the system, stretched thin and often blind to rural poverty, failed him long before anyone online ever knew his name. When state agencies eventually became involved, they weren't walking into a fresh crisis. They were stepping into a decades-long cycle of neglect that had been quietly accepted as normal. And when they removed him from the home, citing safety and health concerns, it wasn't an isolated event. It was the inevitable collision between compassion, bureaucracy, and consequence. The internet's role in his story. Once the Whittakers became a viral subject, everything changed. The house that had been their private world became a stage. Millions of people debated their lives, dissecting every frame, analyzing every sound, arguing about whether the family was being helped or harmed. Some sent money, others sent threats, and through it all, Ray remained silent. The digital noise around him grew louder than his own voice ever could. Creators built channels around the family's story. Donations poured in, sparking arguments about who should manage the funds. Meanwhile, Ray's health appeared to decline. He was thinner, quieter, less expressive. The attention that had begun as fascination quickly turned into a form of pressure, not just on Ray, but on everyone around him. Betty began to pull away from interviews. Larry stopped speaking on camera. Even Patrick, once a vocal supporter, grew weary of defending himself against accusations. And through it all, the one person who couldn't defend himself, the one whose face had sparked it all, was Ray. The emotional toll of exposure. For those living with profound disabilities, emotional regulation can be deeply tied to environment. When a person like Ray experiences sensory overload, from loud noises, flashing lights, or unfamiliar people, it can cause distress that manifests physically: shaking, pacing, vocal outbursts, or complete shutdown. Imagine that, multiplied by the attention of millions. Every video shoot, every stranger's visit, every burst of public attention was a potential storm for Ray's nervous system. His confusion wasn't a lack of understanding. It was a natural response to chaos. And for his caregivers, watching that distress unfold in real time was painful. They didn't always have the tools to help him cope. The internet rarely saw that side. It saw clips edited for emotion or sympathy, not the aftermath of tears, fear, and confusion that followed. For Ray, fame didn't mean opportunity, it meant intrusion. The turning point. It's unclear exactly when things began to unravel, but those close to the family point to early 2024 as a breaking point. Concerns about Ray's hygiene, medical neglect, and overall well-being reached local authorities. Online advocates pushed for intervention, others begged for privacy. In late spring, officials reportedly stepped in. Ray was removed from the home and placed under medical supervision. The news spread quickly. Ray has been taken. The family's falling apart. Betty might lose everything. The same internet that had elevated the Whittakers now turned into a battleground of opinions and blame. But for Ray, none of that mattered. What mattered was that his environment, the only one he'd ever known, had been stripped away. He found himself surrounded by strangers, new routines, bright lights, and endless questions. If he was confused before, now he was lost. And yet, according to sources close to the family, he's receiving consistent medical care for the first time in his life. His diet is monitored, his hygiene is managed, his wounds are healing, his body is safe, even if his mind is struggling to understand why. The meaning of care. This brings us to a difficult truth, one that caregivers and advocates wrestle with every day. What does care really mean? Is it keeping someone in familiar surroundings, surrounded by family and love, even if those conditions fall short of safety standards? Or is it removing them from that environment to provide medical stability, even if it means stripping away their sense of home and identity? In Ray's case, there's no easy answer. He's a man caught between two worlds, the home that loved him and the system that now claims to protect him. The tragedy is that both sides might be right. A question for the rest of us. Ray's story is no longer just about disability, it's about how the world reacts to difference, and how quickly compassion can become voyeurism. The internet gave him attention, but not peace. It brought money, but not understanding. And now, as he adjusts to life away from home, the people who once claimed to care have mostly moved on to other stories. But the question lingers for anyone still watching. When the cameras stop rolling, who's really there for him? What do you think about Ray's situation now? Was it right for the state to step in, or did they go too far? And how should the internet handle stories like this in the future? Share your thoughts below, because the way we respond says as much about us as it does about him. When the news broke that Ray Whittaker had been removed from his family home, the internet ignited once again. Posts, videos, and live streams flooded social media, some celebrating what they saw as a long overdue intervention, others condemning it as government overreach. The same audience that once watched Ray for curiosity or compassion was now divided over his fate. But lost amid all that noise was the simplest truth. A man with profound disabilities had been displaced from the only world he ever knew. For Ray, this wasn't a debate. It was disorientation, confusion, and a new kind of loneliness. The day everything changed. According to people close to the Whittaker family, the day officials arrived was quiet at first. Betty reportedly didn't understand what was happening. There had been rumors for weeks that the county was investigating, that state health officials were reviewing conditions in the home, but no one believed it would come to this. Neighbors said the family was stunned. Betty cried. Larry barely spoke, and Ray didn't comprehend the words, only the tension in the room, the voices, the uniforms, the unfamiliar faces, all of it signaled danger in his mind. He didn't fight, but he didn't cooperate either. He resisted in the only way he knew how, by freezing, refusing to move, clutching onto what was familiar. But eventually, they led him away. To the state, it was a rescue. To the Whittakers, it felt like a kidnapping. To Ray, it was simply terror. Life in a new world. For the first time in his life, Ray now lives under structured medical supervision, though specific details remain private. Those familiar with similar cases can imagine the adjustment, or rather, the shock, that such a move brings. Ray's days are now organized by others. Wake-up times, meals, showers, and bedtime all occur according to a schedule. His clothes are laundered, his medications measured, his meals portioned. He is clean, safe, and watched over constantly. But this safety comes with a cost. Gone are the familiar sounds of his home, Betty's voice, the creak of the porch, the hum of the radio in the kitchen. Instead, there are beeping machines, fluorescent lights, and strangers in scrubs speaking words he can't process. He's likely in a group home or care facility designed for adults with severe disabilities. These places can vary widely. Some are nurturing and well-staffed. Others are sterile and understaffed. The experience depends entirely on the people in charge. For someone like Ray, whose understanding is rooted in repetition and familiarity, this transition would be overwhelming. It's not just about learning new routines, it's about unlearning the world he knew. He may not understand why he's there, he may not even know where he is. What he likely feels is a sense of loss, something he can't name but feels deeply all the same. The family left behind. Back home in West Virginia, the silence in the Whittaker household is heavy. Betty has always been Ray's protector. She was the one who bathed him, dressed him, and made sure he was fed. Even when she struggled to care for herself, she made room in her heart for her brother's needs. Losing him, even temporarily, has left a visible emptiness. Those who followed the family's updates say Betty's demeanor has changed. The spark that once appeared when she talked about her brother is gone. She's quieter now, more withdrawn, like a mother who's lost her child. Larry, too, has retreated from public view. In earlier videos, he would occasionally speak, offering his perspective in his slow, deliberate way. Now, there's only silence. The front porch that once held laughter, conversation, and visitors sits mostly empty. Without Ray there, the rhythm of the house is off. For a family bound by habit and proximity, the absence of one changes the dynamic of all. Public division and online noise. While the family mourned privately, the internet erupted publicly. On one side were those who praised the intervention. It was about time. They said he needed proper care. Others accused the system of breaking apart a family for profit or publicity. They exploited them first, then abandoned them, some argued. And then there were the opportunists, new creators and commentators who turned Ray's removal into fresh content. Every whisper became a headline, every rumor a theory. But few stop to ask, what happens next? Who checks on him? Who makes sure the place he's in is safe, clean, and humane? Who visits him on weekends? Who sits with him when the lights go out? Because the truth is, the system doesn't always guarantee compassion, it guarantees procedure, and procedure doesn't hold your hand when you're scared in the dark. Ray's world through his eyes. To understand what Ray might be experiencing now, we have to step into his world. One shaped by profound disability, sensory sensitivity, and dependence on familiarity. Imagine being surrounded by sounds you can't identify, loud footsteps, unfamiliar machines, people speaking quickly in tones you don't understand. You reach for something familiar, a face, a voice, a hand, but it's not there. You can't ask for help because the words don't come out right when you try to speak, your voice cracks and barks, and people misunderstand it as noise instead of communication. So you stop trying. You stare instead, you point, you grunt, you frown, and the people around you write notes in clipboards, labeling it nonverbal distress or behavioral response. That is Ray's new reality, a life of observation without comprehension, care without connection. For most of us, home is a feeling. For Ray, it was a person, Betty, and you can't replace that with a shift schedule or a medical plan. The ethics of attention. The Whittaker's story raises one of the most difficult questions in modern storytelling. Where does awareness end and exploitation begin? When Mark Lyda's soft white underbelly videos first introduced the family, his intent was to document poverty and resilience, but what happens when the subjects of that documentation cannot consent in the full sense of the word? Did Ray ever understand that millions were watching him? Did he grasp that strangers were analyzing his every sound, gesture, and expression? Of course not. And yet, those videos shaped how the world saw him. They influenced public opinion, funding, and even, indirectly, the state's decision to intervene. That's the paradox. The same exposure that brought money and aid may also have led to his removal. Awareness opened doors, but it also opened wounds. Hope and fear in equal measure. There is hope in Ray's story, fragile, uncertain hope. If he is in a quality facility with dedicated staff, he might receive medical care he never had access to before. He could gain stability, nourishment, and treatment for chronic conditions. He might even find calm in structure, the kind that his caregivers at home couldn't always maintain. But there is fear too, that the same system meant to protect him could forget him, that he could fade into institutional obscurity, just another case file in a long list of adults with developmental disabilities. For Ray, the ideal outcome would be balance, a life where he receives proper care but still maintains family contact, regular visits, familiar voices, small reminders that he's loved and remembered. Whether that's happening right now is anyone's guess. What the Whittaker's story reveals about us. The saga of the Whittakers has always been about more than one family. It's about how the rest of us react to poverty, disability, and difference. We are drawn to what we don't understand. We observe, analyze, and sometimes judge, but rarely do we truly listen. Ray's voice, though hard to decipher, was always speaking. It told a story of endurance, of a man navigating life with the tools he was given, and when that voice was finally amplified to the world, most people didn't hear him, they just looked at him. Maybe the real question isn't whether the Whittakers failed Ray, maybe it's whether we all did. How do you feel about where Ray is now? Do you believe he's better off under state care, or should he have remained with his family? And what responsibility do creators and viewers share in stories like this? Share your thoughts below, because this isn't just Ray's story anymore, it's ours too. The dust has settled, the live streams have ended, the debates that once filled Facebook threads and YouTube comments have gone silent, but for Ray Whittaker, the man at the center of all the noise, life has simply continued, quietly and without the world's permission. He does not know that thousands of people have argued about his life. He does not know that his name trends, that strangers have analyzed his expressions, or that people have fought over who helped him and who used him. For Ray, the only reality that matters is the one directly in front of him, the chair he sits in, the sound of footsteps approaching, the feeling of a hand on his shoulder. And perhaps that's the way it should have always been. A life beyond the lens. When a person becomes a public figure without ever choosing to be one, the world forgets that their story doesn't end when the camera stops. For Ray, the cameras came into his world, not the other way around. People watched him laugh, grunt, gesture, and simply exist. They interpreted those moments through their own emotions, pity, fascination, compassion, even discomfort. But what they didn't see was the fullness of his life, the quiet routines, the private moments, the simple dignity that never made it into edited videos. Now that the internet has largely moved on, Ray's story remains unfinished. He exists in that space between myth and reality, an image people remember but a person few truly understood. Those who have worked with people like Ray know this truth. Behind every case study, every diagnosis, there's a deeply human story filled with small victories that outsiders rarely notice. A smile when a caregiver enters the room, a hand extended toward a familiar sound, a sense of calm after a storm of confusion. That's the life Ray still lives, not glamorous, not dramatic, but deeply real. The Whittaker family's new reality. For Betty, Larry, and the rest of the Whittaker family, the aftermath has been both painful and sobering. Losing Ray's daily presence is more than emotional. It's the loss of purpose, the disruption of a bond that defined their days. Betty, especially, has struggled for decades. Caregiving was her identity. It shaped her routines, her conversations, and even her sense of self-worth. Without Ray at home, that purpose feels fractured. Those who followed her recent updates describe her as quieter, older, somehow weighed down by guilt and helplessness. She misses his presence, the sound of him moving through the house, the way he'd look at her when he needed something, the comfort of knowing he was near. Larry, too, feels the void. For all the family's challenges, they found comfort in closeness, their lives orbiting around each other in a fragile ecosystem that, however flawed, made sense to them. Now that system has collapsed, replaced by distance and bureaucracy. There's talk that Betty and Larry have tried to reach out through official channels, hoping to visit Ray or at least receive updates, but navigating those systems is hard for anyone, nearly impossible for people with limited education or access. And so they wait, hoping the phone will ring, hoping for news, hoping that somewhere, someone will tell them he's okay. The system that fails and tries again. The system that now cares for Ray is not evil, but it is flawed. Facilities that house adults with profound disabilities are often underfunded and understaffed. Workers rotate frequently. Some are kind and dedicated. Others are there because they need a paycheck. The quality of care depends less on policy and more on the compassion of individuals. Ideally, Ray's environment is safe, structured, and nurturing, but even in the best circumstances, there's something institutional about it. The sameness of meals, the routines, the fluorescent lights that never quite turn off. He may have a bed, but not a home. He may have care, but not family. And that distinction matters. This is the gap that so many people with disabilities fall into, caught between the love of those who can't provide everything they need and the efficiency of systems that can't provide the warmth they deserve. Ray's story exposes that tension painfully well. His removal from home may have saved his body, but it fractured his soul's only sense of belonging. The question, then, is not whether he is safe, but whether he is seen. The lessons hidden in his story. What does Ray's story teach us? Not about poverty or fame, but about humanity. It teaches that understanding someone doesn't require words, that dignity doesn't depend on education or eloquence, that people with disabilities aren't inspirations or tragedies. They are individuals with their own rhythm, worth, and right to peace. It teaches that society's compassion too often comes with conditions, that we are eager to help when it feels good, but less willing to stay when things get uncomfortable or complicated. It also shows how fragile ethical storytelling can be in a digital age. Anyone can turn a human life into content. A story meant to raise awareness can easily become a spectacle if empathy turns into consumption. Ray's existence shouldn't have been a performance, it should have been a conversation. One about care, disability, and respect, but instead, the world watched, reacted, and moved on. What the internet left behind. When millions of people watch a person like Ray online, they create a ripple effect, not just of awareness, but of responsibility. Donations were sent, videos were monetized, narratives were shaped, and yet, when the spotlight dimmed, few followed up to see what became of the family they claimed to care about. That's the uncomfortable truth about viral empathy. It's fleeting. The internet moves fast, and the people left behind move slowly, if they move at all. Ray is no longer the subject of trending hashtags or investigative debates. He's just a man again. Unseen, unfilmed, perhaps better off for it, but the questions his story raised still linger. Who gets to tell someone's story? Who profits from it? And who stays when the world stops watching? If we are honest, those questions say more about us than about the Whittakers. Quiet legacy. In the end, Ray Whittaker's legacy is not one of fame or tragedy. It's one of reflection. He has reminded the world, however briefly, that humanity isn't measured in intelligence, money, or social grace. It's measured in how we treat those who can give us nothing in return. He has also revealed the deep cracks in our systems, medical, social, and moral. His life is a call to action for advocates, caregivers, and policymakers to do better, to create a world where people like Ray are not hidden or exploited, but supported and understood. If there's any justice in his story, it will come not from outrage or debate, but from change, from people learning, empathizing, and acting differently because they saw what happens when a man like Ray is forgotten by everyone who was supposed to care. The final thought. Somewhere tonight, Ray sits in a chair, perhaps humming softly, his eyes half closed. Maybe he's eating dinner. Maybe he's looking toward the door, waiting for a face he recognizes. He doesn't know his name has been searched thousands of times online. He doesn't know he's become a symbol. He doesn't need to. All he's ever wanted, all he's ever needed, is something the internet can't give: the feeling of being safe, understood, and loved. If his story moves us, then the truest way to honor him is not to share another video, but to extend that same understanding to those around us, the unseen, the unheard, the forgotten. How do you feel about Ray's legacy now? Do you think his story changed anything for him, his family, or society? And what lessons will you take away from the life of a man who spoke in sounds but taught in silence? Share your reflections below, because maybe, just maybe, that's how change begins. Thank you for watching this video. Click here to watch another video that might interest you.